Yeah, Twitch is just on a crazy delay. The Dungeon Master, my name is Ralph. I'm at Cthulhu on Twitter, and I am joined by this group here. While we play a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Eberron game titled "It Belongs in a Museum." I'm joined, of course, by Al, Andy, and Michael, and I'll throw it over to Al for an introduction of his character.
Hello, this is Big Al, and I am playing Talion Til Devandi, a gnome, your favorite gnome, hopefully. We'll pass it on to Andy.
I'm Andy at Blackfall Press. I will be playing Gideon Blacklake, Carnathy, mercenary, fighter, warrior, and most recently, wetwork specialist? Question mark. Unfortunately, Jules, our Dragonborn sorceress, is not present this evening. She's taking care of a spawnling right now. So. Michael?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael, and I am playing a ghost who is a warforged, kind of young of spirit and mind. Doesn't have like a real good grasp on things like secrecy and stealth, which is great because we're about to infiltrate a foreign land as spies. So this is going to be amazing.
Yeah, and to recap, we'll piece together some of this on the road to where it is exactly that we're going. But to recap, you all became associates, friends perhaps by some measure, largely operating out of the gnomish nation of Zalargo, where Talion is from, and its neighboring nation of Dargoon and all the way through the Mournland. You guys have had several adventures, coming into the company of a ghost and one of the abandoned Cannith manufactories actually in the Mournland, and taking this odd construct under your wing to further explore the world. Mostly mercenary work, and in general, the events that we're chronicling in this campaign all started off with you all acting as night security at a museum in Korenberg.
Apologies on the abrupt absence. I had a request for Tyler.
No. In Korenberg, you all were defending an exhibition of gems at a small museum, and hobgoblins attempted to steal the gem at the center of this exhibit, and that kind of set into motion a lot of intrigue. The gem's previous owner, who had lent it to the museum for exhibition, was turned to stone. No one knew exactly why the hobgoblins were after this treasure, but an investigation of it proved that it was a magical artifact capable of summoning spectral hobgoblin warriors. It was ferried out of Zalargo by you all by lightning rail. The lightning rail was actually set upon by some bugbear bandits, but you all dealt with that pretty summarily. And an underground gambling card tournament was played through on your way to the nation of Breland and eventually to the city of Sharn. In Sharn, we languished there for a few sessions. It was all pretty interesting and enjoyable. We got into a lot of family dynamics of Talion finding his missing siblings working a print shop there. And
I got into college.
Yes. A ghost.
I beat up a halfling.
A ghost was
and protesters.
A ghost was admitted into Morgrave University. You all celebrated the Festival of Bright Blade, one of the holy festivals of Doldorn. A gladiatorial match was won by Gideon. Talion spent some time reconnecting with his sisters, the twins, and as you all deposited the gem in the safekeeping of the crown, you were also then tasked, or offered perhaps, a job by one of the members of the King's Citadel, or the Dark Lanterns, or one of the Brelish intelligence agencies. He was pointing you Drome words, or Droam, depending on your pronunciation. And it seems that the fate of this gem and the terrorist organization operating in Drome are linked in some way. A series of petrifications kind of pointing back to the involvement of some of the more monstrous elements in Drome. But regardless, all my notes are actually on my phone this evening, so I'm not ignoring anybody when I look at this. After the conclusion of Brightblade, in order to kind of ease everyone's mass exodus from the city of Sharn, the train fares and tolls and things of that nature are waived. So you all are kind of forcing your way through Lower Tavik's Landing, through the crowd. The population of the city, Sharn, already a major city on the coast of Breland, swells greatly during the Festival of Brightblade. You could see that a wizard-looking gentleman in a dark blue cloak and robes appears at the train station, kind of intercepting a lot of you, and he hands a wrapped package to the Dragonborn in your party. You're all just kind of bustling through the crowd, although the crowd starts to give you a little bit of a berth when they see this individual. And he kind of just has a brief conversation with Azure, and he says, your request from Morgrave University, and if you ever are to return to the city of Sharn and the Guardians of the Gate see your identification papers, they will of course require that you surrender it for the time that you're here. It can be returned upon your future egress as well. She, takes the package and unfolds it a little bit. You could see what looks like, you might think it's like a drinking horn. It's certainly a horn of some sort. But she quickly wraps it back up and stuffs it into her satchel. And you all are set aboard one of the lightning rails. You can hear the crackling of lightning, and the smell of burnt ozone kind of wafts through the windows. It's a very crowded train ride, but you're bound out, leaving Sharn through First Tower and trundling on a few hours' ride to the city of Rote. You'd seen the lightning rail platform in Rote before. At this point, when you disembark the train here, Talion, a House Civis messenger, actually rushes up to you and hands you a letter.
What does it say? What's in the letter?
In brief terms, in kind of coded speech, and again, largely unsigned as the similar communications you've received from Codger have been, you actually wrote to him and you were essentially asking if he had any objection to you taking work for the Brellish Crown, or if you had any further need of his services. I think that was the nature of your last communication with him. But basically, this is again, it looks like a letter from one of your aunts, although again, it appears that, she's omitted her name. It basically says, I trust in you that you will act in the best interest of those who care about you. Safe travels is essentially what you get. So you think that he's releasing you from your duties. It does say, P.S. An aggrieved dwarf has contacted the family, alleging some sort of slight against him. I'm certain that whatever befell him was his own doing, but do be nicer going forward.
It's just my aunt. Don't worry about it.
So you disembark the platform in Rote, and Rote is actually the capital city of Breland, although a lot less grandiose perhaps than Sharn, with all of its towers and its height and whatnot. But when you all disembark here, you find yourselves kind of caught up in a crowd that is heading west of Rote, pouring out through kind of the House Orion tradeway. Many people on foot, some on horseback, some carriages that had been stored here. But it's pretty much a short walk from Rote down to the river, to Galeth Spire. So you guys are eventually pressed onto the ferry to Galeth Spire, itself a city along the Dagger River there, I believe. And you could see the ferry gets loaded down until it's almost taking on water, and then it just, ushers back and forth. So this crossing is usually fairly quick, but just because of the massive throng of people, you do find yourself with a little bit of downtime. Talion, usually in situations like this, in a large crowd, as you've done throughout the Festival of Brightblade, you've been known to pick a pocket or two. Is that something you're going to still take on here? The train ride, the ferry ride?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Most certainly.
So there's a large variety of people here. Some of them are just kind of farmers heading back to the homesteads in the Brelish countryside. Some of them are traders that have business in the outlying cities here and such, and other kind of craftsfolk. Do you have any real... I don't want to say scruples, but do you have preferred targets? I mean, obviously those with wealth over those not, or just enough of those without wealth to kind of add up?
Well, no. I mean, if you're like a farmer, I'm not going to mess with you. So you'd have to be at least a decent. You have to be a merchant that looks like you're making a decent wages, and that you would. I like to take. I don't think of it as stealing so much as borrowing, without any intent to pay back. But you can only borrow from people that have money to borrow from. You know what I mean?
Certainly. A Ghost, did you happen to make your divination rolls for this traveling day?
I have not, but yes, so thank you for reminding me.
And Talion, go ahead and give me a sleight of hand. And in case this goes horribly wrong, maybe a Ghost will...
All right. I have a 14 and an 18.
Okay. And so a sleight of hand from you, Talion.
18.
All right. You could check your passive perception, the rest of the party. I don't think anybody's got probably an 18. So you might not even be aware of Talion's... although you've traveled with him for some time, so you've probably seen him in action. Talion, you pocket the equivalent of about 30 silver over the course of the days or so travel. I actually didn't measure out the distance, so I'm just kind of abstract, and then I'll fix the dates later. But you spend basically the better part of a day or two traveling through these sites, basically. You see the ferry, eventually you board the ferry and cross to Galeth Spire. There's a 600-foot tall, thin blue rock standing over the harbor of the city. And like I said, it's on the river. It's kind of a major trade port. But that is, as you've heard of its reputation, the Galeth Spire, for which Galeth Spire is named. The whole city, once you are off the water and you don't have the benefit... You're in within the walls and you're not on the water. There's a faint smell, a sort of chemical smell throughout most of the town. But the general inhabitants don't seem to be bothered by it. You make your way towards the House Deneth Enclave, where you were given a letter of recommendation to help secure an audience with the caravan captain. This is part of the cover, basically, that you were provided by your patron for this adventure, a man by the name of Kane. Looking at that again, you can see that it just says that you performed adequately, or well even, caravan duties for the 3 coins coster. So Gideon, just, you don't know this city per se, but judging by the walls and the location of the buildings, you just kind of follow your instinct towards the most defensible place in the city, and that is where you find the House of Deneth Enclave. Appealing to the guards there, you are brought before the captain of they call him the caravan captain, as there are a number of caravans that muster here and do head for Drome. So the three of you kind of producing this letter to him, you can see that he scrutinizes it, looks you over, and maybe we should just recap what exactly he sees here. A ghost. Are you still wearing your unicorn headband and billowing cape?
I no longer have the unicorn horn that I won when I won the gambling tournament. And I think the hat every day probably got a little old on the lightning rail. So I'm back to my basic form, which is very similar to the image you'll see above me. But I'm a dwarven-sized warforged, so a little bit shorter than normal, but still within the right range. And I have a very fancy yellow cloak that I wear about me. I also have a heavy dwarven ring on a chain around my neck.
And Gideon, with your new suit of armor, polished and largely undented from your gladiatorial fight.
It's shouldn't be dented. That's adamantine. It's very hulking, bearded and mustachioed fellow with a kind of slight hair tied back in a ponytail, but. Biggest thing is noticing a very well armed and armored individual, just kind of dull black heavy armor, javelin over one shoulder, shield, hammer, throwing axes, in addition to a very well worn traveler's pack and a rather nice set of boots.
So he looks at a ghost and he doesn't understand what to make of you. He thinks maybe that you're a construct, not even a warforged, that maybe, a homunculus of some sort. Gideon, he understands, and he probably looks at and addresses you the most during this conversation, because he's mostly written Talion off as a non-threatening. But Talion, what's your traveling outfit look like?
It's nobody expects the guy in the gaudy clothes to be the thief, so it's like purple and red and very, very it doesn't look like it's expensive though. It looks really cheap, but almost clownish. Yeah,
ostentatious.
There you go. That's the perfect word. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The captain gestures to a stack of broadsheets on his desk. It looks like several issues of the Kornberg Chronicle, and he says, "Not much trouble is expected on our expeditions to Drome. We only go as far. Actually, he would say Drome. We only go as far as Greywall for obvious reasons. But," and he kind of gestures down to the broadsheets, and he says, "Hear tell of an attack on a lightning rail somewhere over in Zalargo not too long ago. So perhaps a few extra hands on this route wouldn't be completely unnecessary. So in exchange for having your food and security kind of seen to cots in the field tents and everything, basically they'll set up as they go, and even with a stipend of a gold piece per day to kind of be paid out when you all reach the city of Greywall, you are dubbed honorary. You're conferred the honorary rank of Blade Mark, which is kind of like the lowest grunt within House Deneth. And you are quickly assigned to a caravan that is actually mustering now to kind of depart. You will camp in the fields basically this evening. Unless there's anything that you guys wanted to tend to while in Galith's Spire.
If a ghost has an opportunity to take a closer look at the broadsheets, I'm going to start looking through them for any food critic sort of situation.
Yeah. So while the caravan captain is kind of explaining the details to Gideon, you lean over to the corner of the desk and start just kind of leafing through. Yeah, I mean, the Korenberg Chronicle certainly has like a food and culture section, and you can see that it's probably folded up and pushed to the back. It wasn't anything that he was interested in. You're going to try and you're just going to read what you can, like a quick scan, or you're just stuffing that in your pocket?
Yeah, I mean, if it's unattended and I think I could use it later, I think it's mine by right.
All right. Why don't you make a sleight of hand check to move this crinkly paper into your... You're just going to... I imagine you just crumpling it up and shoving it into your pocket as...
Yeah, this isn't more sleight of hand as much as just hoping I'm not being paid attention to at the time. I rolled an 11. I have a +3 on stealth, so 14.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. He's explaining the expectations to Gideon. You will obey the orders of the ranking members of House Denith on this, but as long as you don't make any trouble and you keep an eye on the horizon, you'll earn your keep. So yeah, you stuff that into your pockets to kind of supplement your reading materials. As you all join in with the caravan, you can see that there are a number of people on foot, some on horseback, some horse-drawn carriages, and a couple of carriages of kind of odd construction. Talion, you can make an intelligence check to kind of size these up. If anybody else feels like they have like a general knowledge of the dragon-marked houses or things of that nature, you could throw in on this too. I would say it's probably intelligence.
I kind of think a ghost would know because of my extensive reading, but I rolled poorly, so I don't.
It just strikes
It's
you.
a wizard thing.
The 16.
I'm reading those reviews right now, so I'm not even paying attention to the carriages.
Perfect. These carriages are constructed without hitches for horses, so it seems like unless there's like going to be some armature and reins kind of brought out and attached to it, that it wouldn't have a means of locomotion. That's how it seems to the other two of you. Talion, you've heard of these by reputation. As a bard tends to acquire just kind of random bits of knowledge. House Orion has carts for moving people or cargo that actually bind an earth elemental to the locomotion of it. So as you all are kind of falling in with the ranks here, and you meet the kind of staff sergeant or whatever who's over your particular section of, there's maybe about a dozen carts or so. You are maybe a little surprised as the horses begin to pull away, and this cart just begins to glide through the earth, just kind of displacing it like water and leaving no real trail in its wake. And like I said, there's maybe about 2 of these, which are, like I said, maybe a bit of a rarity. But for the most part, you depart on a House Orion trade road, and as you exit the walls of the city, heading further into the western reaches of Breland, the smell gets particularly intense, that chemical smell. And you could see off to the north as you exit the city, the dye works. All throughout the city's market, particularly where you were mustering, and, the fashion of the people in your group even. The color is Breland blue, and the dye is, a very, popular export of Galith's fire. So you can see the dye works and just kind of a light blue haze of fog kind of hanging over him, like a big chemical refinery quarry pit situation. Far enough inland to not kind of threaten the river, but not far enough away from the city to kind of impart its stench. And this, again, not that you all had time to kind of do a survey or that you would even have been offered one, but this is the city where you may come into some land if all things go well. if you remember your rewards that were laid out. So perhaps you'll get accustomed to the smell in time as well. Cerulean dye in bolts of cloth and brellish blue. And that seems to be some of the cargo that's also headed out of country. You ride and march through farm and ranch land, miles and miles of miles and miles, until eventually you reach Ardev. Like I said, camping for another day or two. The caravan moves kind of slowly. You guys are kind of rotated through, marching alongside some of the crates, or some of the carts, keeping lookout. And also, Gideon, you're, as kind of the most competent seeming one of the group to your staff sergeant, you're also assigned to travel with the Outriders for a time. So you go before the retinue and kind of challenge anybody that you pass. For the most part, you just don't see much other than like carts pulled by simple oxen, kind of heading to or from Ardev or working the lands nearby. You reach, as I said, what was the name of the city? Ardev? Yes. You reach Ardev, which is kind of a bastion of civilization in all of the ranch and farmlands that you've seen so far. Some of the caravan departs here. Some of them look like they are the farmers and such that you've seen returning, or the tradespeople returning from Brightblade that you've traveled with for some time. A team of Dwarven prospectors actually joins the caravan here. A ghost, they look at your strange manufacture and they don't know what to make of you. But by the time you reach another knight's camp, they insist that you drink with them. They've brought along several kegs.
I will heartily agree. And then
Don't
ask them,
drink
what does it
anything,
taste
do
like?
you?
I don't smell anything either, so the whole dye thing just was like, I don't get it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, seems fine to you. The thing that might have stuck out to you is the number of like laborers you saw with dark blue, purple hands. People who work the dye works, they can't really scrub that off. Yes, so they insist on drinking heavily every night at camp and claim they will sober only when their boots touch the mountains and their work begins. And they gesture off across the broad expanse. By the end of that day of travel, you can even see the Grey Wall Mountains off to the southwest. Gideon, you notice something during these next few days of travel. As a ghost interrogates the dwarves at night and about the taste of their various kegs. Every time they open a new one, a ghost, you ask how it tastes, and
Yes, yeah, exactly.
They say it's the same as last night's.
Does the first taste like the last taste, or does it change over time? Does it, if you've eaten something different, does it taste different? Like, pairing.
You can see one just looks to the other, and one looks to the other and says, "I told you he wasn't a dwarf. Not a dwarfish bone in his body, or gear in his body, for that matter." Gideon, this is to your eye, probably. You notice, as you depart Ardev, there is a retinue of Brellish soldiers. They seem to be kind of rotating out of patrols in the western countryside. Go ahead and make an insight check for me.
Insight? I'm actually good at that. Total 12?
Okay.
Wait, yep, total 12.
They seem tired. Which you would expect for days of kind of marching around the outskirts of the kingdom. But you don't really read much else about their disposition. But the one thing that kind of sticks out to you is the number of them. It seems like there are more here than you would expect for a border patrol. And you don't know...
As if they were reinforcing something, reinforcing some point, or otherwise, shoring up people.
It's possible. Ardev is kind of near enough to King Borinel Irwanarn, I believe is the King of Breland. It's near enough to his estates that there might just always be an increased amount of security. But it seems to you, especially over the next course of the day's travels, when you can see units in the distance, it seems like there is an increased presence of military. Not necessarily that they're even fortifying a point, but that they've almost like redoubled their efforts to keep an eye on the border. Now, like, you're familiar, like, it's a tenuous situation. Drome, or Droem, I'm going to keep saying that every time, is not part of the Five Kingdoms. It's not subject to the Treaty of Thronehold. It's always considered like a somewhat hostile nation, at least by some. So you're not sure if this is like saber rattling, like if they have a need to be on guard, or if this is a show of force. You know, your read of the body language of the soldiers, and even, you know, the marching in the distance and everything. With that insight check, you're not, you know, 100% clear on what it would be.
I'm sure Breland would like the territory back if they had a chance of actually taking it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when a few hags say that we own everything west of those mountains now, it stings a little. But aside from the prospectors and the military situation, Italian, I told you got about 30 silver pieces, right? And let's say 4 gold.
Yes.
Lining your pockets as you've been going.
I didn't get the 4 gold. I'll take that.
Yeah. By the time you all reach the border, you could see, since you're sticking to the Orion trade road, you're passing north of the Grey Wall Mountains. So the border patrol, like, they don't have like a good choke point necessarily. But unless you want it to like peel away from your caravan and ride north or south to go around them, which would maybe seem suspicious to everyone you're traveling with, you know, border patrol is just something you have to deal with. This slows the caravan to a crawl, as basically the Brellish guards here call for everyone to present their identification papers. The caravan captain is at the front, and Gideon, you're nearer the front perhaps at this point than the rest of your group. But he kind of protests and says, by the authority of the 12, House Deneth, those employed by House Deneth should not be subject to such intense scrutiny. And the Brellish guards just kind of say, we'll see everyone's identification papers. We'll have you on your way shortly. So to that end, like I said, this process kind of slows down to a crawl. Gideon, you work your way back towards the remainder of the group. Azure is just kind of atop one of the Orion trade carts. It's a smooth enough ride that you can kind of stand up there and keep a lookout on the horizon. But she goes in and she pulls out her identification papers. She's not wanted for any crimes that she's aware of at the moment. So, how do the rest of you? I mean, Talion, you would have identification papers. You would even maybe have signet or something to show that you're from House Civis.
I'm pretty sure that this was part of our packet from Kane, that he was supposed to provide us.
He gave you a letter of recommendation to get you hired, but he specifically said that he didn't think that it would be a good idea to furnish you all with secret identities because he could tell that a ghost can't keep a secret. I mean, There's nothing necessarily stand out about any of your papers. It's just I'm just wondering how you feel about this scrutiny. If you know, are you going to ask to see his manager? Are you going to push back? Are you just going to hand your papers over? Just wondering how you deal with slight bureaucratic annoyance.
Well, Italian's used to it, so he just hands it over.
Perfect.
Raising a fuss only brings more attraction, so
and
just
Gideon, here's an interesting thing to think about. What's the surname listed on your identification papers?
On mine?
Yeah.
Probably my actual name.
Right. I don't know if the rest of the party has ever, like...
No.
Yeah. But let's just see. I'm going to make a luck check for you just to see if the guard doesn't call it. All right, so let's say 10 or less. No. He just looks at it. Carnathy. All right. He just shoves it back your way. Talion, your identification papers, I think maybe whether you want to or not, unless you've taken some sort of means to ablate it, I feel like you would have a mark that shows that you're relative to the house.
I think so. I don't know why. The other time I would think is if there was a specific instruction to do so.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anything like that, so I think it would just be pretty much my standard papers.
The same guy kind of looks at yours and he says a Carnathy and a Zill. Yeah, both of you are far from home. According to the captain's manifest and the roster of the House of Deneth employees, you, and you. And he looks over at a ghost. A ghost. Something that let me get your feelings on this. As part of your studies, the department head of the history department at Morgrave University, and you turned in an assignment probably in the post at RDev, just because when you leave Breland, you don't know if you'll be able to mail in papers and such.
Gotcha.
So you've been reading your history books, and you've completed a written assignment and such. Go ahead and make an intelligence check with advantage for me. Or history with advantage, if you have it.
With advantage, that's a 16 total.
Okay, you're doing pretty well. You're like a solid B minus. in your right now, your course load is really kind of consisting of this Siren history. But before you left Sharn, kind of flashing back to those days. Warforged, as part of the Treaty of Thronehold, were granted citizenship relative to the country that purchased them during the war. So Gideon could tell you that the Warforged in Karnath specifically were technically freed by the Treaty of Thronehold, but they were kind of considered to be indentured servants until they worked off the cost of purchase, basically. So in the rest of the Five Kingdoms, you're getting treated a lot better than that. I would say since you weren't purchased by any of the Five Kingdoms during the last war, Talion probably pulled some strings to have you issued identification papers for Zalargo. And that's ostensibly like where you've been from. But the department head, after kind of conferring with the artificers that spoke with you back at Morgrave University, pulled some strings, and you actually have an endorsement on your identification papers that marks you as a Siren refugee.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he thought so. Given your interest in Seer, the coursework you completed, and the details of your manufacture that you gave to, like I said, the artificers and mage rights. Now that being said, how does that make you feel about your identification papers?
I mean, I do think that would probably be the closest to what, because a ghost just doesn't care. Like, none of this means or matters to them at all unless it becomes important, because something that happens. But if I show them papers and they let me through, that's like me casting a spell. Like, I have material components and gestures, and then I get entrance into a place. I just cast a spell, basically.
Perfect. Okay, so you present that.
I will ask for restaurant recommendations while we're talking, though.
This border guard shakes his head. Is that why you're going to Droam? For the cuisine?
In part, yes. I'm hoping to do a study on the cuisine across the Five Realms.
And Greywall. There aren't... He shakes his head again. Like you can see he's struggling. Maybe he knows that Warforged don't even eat. Maybe he's still trying to struggle to figure out what you are. Yeah. Ask anyone on the streets to point you to the nearest grist mill.
Oh, grist mill. Oh, that sounds exotic.
Oh, yeah. too exotic for my tastes. But, as I said, a lot of you are marked on the captain's roster as honorary blade marks. Just needed the coin. This one looks dressed fine enough. He kind of gestures to Talion. I can't imagine that caravan guard duty pays well enough to keep you in finery like this.
I'm very good at making deals. Give him a nice week.
I'd like to know why the lot of you are bound for Droam. Droam.
Right now, the job.
You can see at this point the captain kind of comes over, seeing that this guy is hassling you, and he's already a little incensed that he's delaying him. The captain seems to be the kind to keep his trains running on time. So he says, "They're under the employ of House Deneth. This should be sufficient. Let us move along." The border guard hands you all back your papers and kind of steps back. His companions have kind of cleared the line behind you, and he begins kind of shouting out to just all within earshot. "You may resume your travels. Those of you who worship the silver flame would do best to keep that quiet within these lands. Crossing this border now, you are leaving the Five Kingdoms. When you reach Greywall, go no further into the country. When you are in Greywall, do not venture outside the Calabash. This is where House Thrash holds sway. They will see to your well-being." And all the horses are kind of spurred. The earth gliding carts begin to earth glide once again. "Keep to the Calabash while in Greywall." Some of the other border guards kind of echo his call. And then one of them, as you guys are riding past, actually says, "May the host keep you safe." So the caravan grinds back up to speed. You are still on a House Orion trade road, but you are leaving behind the somewhat fertile lands, the cattle and ranch lands of the western reaches of Breland. And by the time you begin to make camp on your way to Greywall, the soil seems like a little bit dustier, the night a little bit colder, the land just a little bit flatter on this side of the mountains. The dwarves drink until their kegs are completely gone, and in the morning they turn and head south towards the Greywall Mountains with a small contingent of other prospectors. They say that there's a House Thrash enclave in the Greywall, and that's where they're bound for. And they mean the Greywall Mountains, not the city of Greywall. But regardless, by the time you all reach the city of Greywall, you see a number of orcs, half-orcs, and a few humans in the livery of House Thrash. You see the kind of banner of a golden dragon, which is like a cross between like a dragon and a lion, basically. The symbol of House Thrash. And you also see a flag bearing like an iron gauntleted fist clenched over a field of eyes. And oh man, hold on. I made up a symbol for Droam, and now I can't remember what the third thing is. And a third thing.
Ooh, the third thing.
Yeah. Damn it. That sucks. Yeah, basically the three symbols kind of depicting the three hags that you know to kind of rule over Droam. You all pass into Greywall. In addition to these House Thrash, some you would maybe qualify them as mercenaries. They're at least maybe the guard or whatever. They kind of wave everyone past, and you can see that some of the House Deneth blade marks and even the captain that you're with bristle a little bit at their presence here. Like maybe this should be a House Deneth job to kind of keep the peace for citizens of the Five Nations, but they shrug and kind of saunter by. But along with these somewhat familiar faces, although more orcs and half-orcs than you've seen perhaps previously, there is a pot-bellied ogre lazily just kind of leaning on his club, ostensibly like keeping watch as well, but leaving the actual like enforcement to the House Thrashed. And you can see a harpy perched on the gate. As it swings open, she kind of takes to wing, but you all are admitted into the city. As you ride through Greywall, the streets that you're in presently, you can see that a lot of the construction here is stone, and a lot of it is kind of haphazard. You see like doorways kind of leaning at odd angles, and roofs pitching, kind of precariously and things like that. It looks ramshackle, but even as you're going about, you can see that there is new construction going up, and there seems to be a coordination of harpies helping to lift heavy loads with ogres and things of that nature. You see goblin merchants with blankets and all of their goods spread out on them. In Sharn, they would call these rat markets, perhaps, but it looks like it's just the norm here. All kinds of little baubles and things for purchase. But you're led a short ways into the city to the Calabash. Does anybody in this party speak Goblin? This is something I feel like comes up a lot.
I do not.
No.
Given everybody's kind of approximation to Dargoon for a time, I would say you all can just kind of make intelligence checks just to see what you can piece together here.
Oh, natural 20.
No crap, I got one too.
Oh, wow. Nice. Talion, are you going to roll?
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm just gonna no. I'll roll 2, but
A third natural 20?
no. 10 total.
Nice. So Talion, you don't speak a lot of Goblin. You speak a few phrases, probably just the curse words, and enough to know how to ask where the bathroom is. But you look around, and one of the things you notice is, aside from these kind of informal goblins peddling wares on their carpets and blankets and such, there are other buildings that you imagine are shops and maybe a tavern or an inn or whatever. But you don't see any markings. It looks like, in consideration that maybe a lot of these citizens aren't literate, there's just symbols. So you see just kind of like crudely drawn hammer and anvil, and you see smoke, and you're like, that must be a smithy. And you see a crudely drawn like hank of meat and a large number of goblins and kobolds and orcs and such standing in a line. And you see smoke again, and you're like, must be some sort of, fest house or whatever. Those of you that got natural 20s, I wish I could give you a lot more than this. Maybe I will. I'll think about how to pile it on. But you would know, perhaps you guys were camping with some mercenaries in Dargoon at some point, and you heard the word Calabash. And you know that Calabash is like where they kept their hunting dogs. It literally means the kennels. So you all are being ushered as part of this caravan towards the kennels. But a ghost, you also see the number of people standing. You can see that standing in line, you can see that they have plates and like tarnished silverware forks and like chipped wooden cups and things. And it just seems like a long line, some sort of food line for like a cafeteria or something.
I'll look to Gideon. Can I please? Can I go? Can I go?
Dinner time, isn't it?
This grist mill seems to be particularly close to the Calabash. You can see that the caravan in front of you is kind of heading forward and pouring out into a plaza. So a ghost, you could hop into line here. Are the rest of you going to wait along with him, or?
And I will.
We should probably finish the job first.
Well,
The line will be here when we get done.
in this section of town, you guys are attracting some looks. And some of the goblin merchants are kind of barking out at you all. An unspent sun rod. Look at this mirror, only 3 cracks. Just kind of coming up and showing you all of their junk and baubles and such. But you don't see a lot of disdain per se, but you are also near kind of the one quarter of the city where you're expected perhaps. So as the caravan fans out into this large plaza, you can see it is dominated by a massive statue of a golden statue of a roaring dragon. Again, another symbol of House Thrashk and their power here. But you spread out into the roar, the plaza here, basically at the center of the Calabas. The captain comes over and hands you all your wages. I'll figure out how many days of travel you all have been at this, but he does kind of look a lot of you over and say, he kind of commends you on safe travel, and he says, if the lot of you have never been here before, and I take it you have not, and he kind of looks over the shoulder into the distance, and we could see a ghost standing in line at a grist mill down the street.
I probably bought a bunch of mirrors with cracks in them too.
Perfect. Yeah. A half-used candle, a mirror with 3 cracks, a jar that's labeled Griffin Grease. You just have all of these
Oh, yep. I'm an easy mark. Yep.
Perfect. He says, and I could tell that you've never been here before. If you're going to allow your friend to put any of that inside of his body, you can see he's still not sure what to make of your construction. But he says,
it can't be poisoned for what it's worth.
He says, the accommodations here within the Calabas are suitable for outsiders. I recommend the Twilight Palace. And he hands over your coins. He hands over a ghost coins, and he says, "See that your friend gets paid." And he heads off to kind of oversee the House of Deneth. They're going to muster and head to their own barracks. But all the tradespeople and such that you've traveled with begin to disperse. The carts are being stowed for the return trip and things of that nature. But you are strangers now in a strange land. What do you want to do?
I'll probably wait for a ghost to finish in line before escorting them to the Twilight Palace. And if I can find any other information about it, what's good to eat or drink there? Do they have baths? Do they have, what kind of rooms do they have? Any information would be good.
So a ghost, you're in line behind. At this point, all that's left in front of you is a gaggle of very hungry-looking goblins. A lot of the goblins and orcs and such gave you a bit of a strange look as you got into line. Particularly those that seem to have lined up behind you are giving you a little bit more of a death stare, as if to say you're not from Drome. You don't belong in this line.
I totally don't understand. I'm just smiling, which I guess I can't smile. I'm just looking at them and nodding my head. Yes, I totally get what you're trying to say to me, man.
Perfect. But by the time you turn the corner to kind of head into this dimly lit building, there's there's a large cooking fire behind a counter, and there's several orcs and hobgoblins and such kind of meting out what looks like it looks like meat. You've seen your companions describe substance like this as meat. But it doesn't look like a meat you've ever seen them ingest before. But basically everybody is presenting their plates or, just kind of holding out their hand and getting either the equivalent of like a flank cut of steak, or perhaps a jerky. It seems like these individuals are just kind of sizing up the creature in front of them and giving them what they think is an appropriate amount of nutrition. So the goblins in front of you, small creatures, are just getting handfuls of jerked meat, kind of just pulled haphazardly out of a pot by one of the orc chefs. You've heard your friends say chefs for things like this, but the large cooking fire is kind of filling this place with smoke, and the late midday sun is kind of streaking through like the wooden slats. It's just haphazardly constructed. The one thing that you would notice, maybe with some amount of joy, is that nobody is paying for this. Everybody's just getting their meat and heading off. There are some benches and tables, but some people are just taking their meals and heading out the door. So by the time you ante up to the front, the orc chef is kind of regarding you and just turns his head ever so slightly. He you get it looks like a steak, although a steak. You feel like when you've seen steaks on plates before, they seem to have a lot more consistency to them, more solidity. When he just kind of...
It's a steak soup.
Yeah, when he slaps this into your hands, I don't know, if you have a mess kit, if you would have had a plate, you're just putting it on the cracked mirror, you just hold up.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
You can see that it, ever so slightly, make a perception check for me.
Okay.
I mean, it's not based on smell or taste or anything, so this is just this is a good perception check for you.
16 on the die. I have -1 perception.
You hold this up, and it might just be a trick of the dim light and the smoke in this room, but as you kind of regard it and wiggle the plate a little bit, and you can see it just kind of like a little bit of gelatin, like shakes. You feel like you see it move ever so slightly, like a millimeter, basically. A millimeter, like, expanding, like, almost as if it's just, like, flattening out maybe on your makeshift plate a little bit.
It's exotic.
Indeed.
All right. We'll take my prize to a table somewhere. I'll scooch in next to some other people, and I'll just sit there and look at them eat their food, and I'll just kind of watch mine and see if it moves again.
So you sit between a couple of goblins who kind of like scoot to give you a bit of berth on the bench seat, and they lean over their plates kind of instinctively. Like you're taller, which in goblin society means a lot apparently. So you can see that they hunker down kind of almost defensively over their plate as they scooch away from you. But then one of them just can't take his eyes off of you, like he's watching to see like what you're going to do as he's like chewing at his jerkies.
I will mimic them because I think that's like the thing we're supposed to do. So I assume this is just, this is how they eat. So I will mimic and hunch over my food, but I will not eat it. I'm just going to continue to look at them. And then I might even ask them, what does it taste like? Can you describe what it tastes like? In common, because I don't speak goblin.
Tastes like meats.
Ooh, excellent. Thank you. Could you elaborate?
Tasted better yesterday.
Oh, interesting. Why?
He just, like, the goblin just shakes his head. He shrugs. Fresher, maybe?
Oh, so freshness has a lot to do with taste. Good to know. No one's told me that before. Thank you.
So, all that being said, you eventually muster up and take a bite. Probably thankful for your lack of taste at this moment. Yeah. You garner a few strange stares, but you're able to kind of finish this meal uninterrupted. And you're able to rejoin the party unless there's any other spectacle you'd like to make of yourself here.
I think I've done enough damage.
Perfect. So, I As you head back out and catch up with your companions, it seems like you by the time you kind of enter the plaza, you see Gideon and Talion as the majority of the crowd is kind of dispersed, and they're standing basically across the plaza, looking up at a large building, a grand hostel. The banners of House Galanda and House Fjarlin hang outside this grand hostel. That's the best way to describe it. The swell of music gathering about the threshold and beckoning you in, an adaptation of an old Galifar tune, but with a soaring violin accompaniment. Basically, like I said, it just looks like the grand... It's like I don't know, I've never seen the Grand Budapest Hotel. I don't know why I want to make that reference, but it looks like a large enough hotel to have rooms for any number of travelers that come along here. Multi-story, appointed with those banners, and you know that House Galanda means hospitality. And like looking from where you are, you can see some other taverns and inns in the nearby area, but this one was recommended. And Talion, I think to your musician's ear... Wait, do you even play an instrument? Or you're like an orator bard, aren't you?
I'm like an orator. I mean, I'm sure that I have some innate understanding of music, but...
Well, this music sounds to all of you like the equivalent of like classical music. Like this is like harkening back to the Kingdom of Galifar, but it has obviously some like artistic license with the additional strings and such. So like a modern take on like a Beethoven classic or something that you're all kind of hearing pouring out of this. And you imagine that that's the House Fjarlin influence. Galanda will make sure that you have a bed for the night. Fjarlin will make sure that you're entertained. But I'm just going to assume that you all enter this building at some point.
As long as I've collected a ghost. And...
Yeah. He comes across the plaza, and the three of you head on into the Twilight Palace.
Well, how was it?
It was meat.
I'm sure it was, of some sort. Your wages.
Oh.
And I eye Talion as I hand him all of his due wages.
Excellent. I have many more mirrors I need to buy.
I'm sure
the city
you
is ripe with them. People just come up and give them to you. Some people did give them to me. Well, they didn't look too happy about it, but they didn't really argue too much either.
And Gideon,
keep an eye on your coin purse.
You could see a few dark green flecks on his face, kind of surrounding his mouth hole. I guess I could have just said mouth. Yeah, like a dark green.
Do you know what meat that was?
Fresher yesterday than today, they say.
Wipe your mouth, let's go in.
So as you guys cross the threshold, you're reminded of the more cosmopolitan venues that you saw in Sharn. And you know that you are well outside the boundaries of the Five Kingdoms, but you feel at the same time very far from Drone at this point. I've never seen Casablanca, but my read of this place gives me very Casablanca vibes. So you could, like, looking around the room, you do see some of the citizens of Drone about. You could see like a couple of goblins. And even like a whole gaggle of kobolds kind of even standing atop one of the tables in the building as if it wasn't even sized for them correctly. And they're dipping their smaller mugs into like a standard size mug basically and cheersing and partying on a tabletop. But you see all manner of other individuals. Carnathi, Brelish, just a mixture of humans and half-elves, a couple of dwarves in the rooms as well. This seems like a pretty motley assortment of individuals. And you imagine that some of these people, this is a fine establishment. You could see the food that's kind of being carried about by the waiters and waitresses also looks delicious. Those of you that haven't eaten the strange meat are perhaps getting hungry. But just the quality of the music, the quality of the food, the atmosphere here is great. But you don't think that that's enough to bring someone to Drome just for this ambiance. So I would say Talion and Gideon, you guys have a better read of humanoids than a ghost does. If you guys want to make insight checks just to get a lay of the land here.
Oh, 15.
Inside.
Looks like they have meat here as well. Perhaps we should order some meat.
Ooh, I kind of fumbled that one. It's a 10.
Okay. You're taking in the musicians. And as an agent of House Civis, you know that Fjarlin, in addition to being entertainers, they also dabble as spies. So the presence of a large number of House Fjarlin entertainers here, you're just kind of like looking at them and sizing them up to be like, what do they know? Do they have any information that would be useful to me? Also, why are they in this place of all places? So that kind of distracts you a bit, but getting in with like a 16 as you survey this room, as I said, people don't come here for the ambience. You imagine that some of these people are expatriates. Maybe you have some personal semblance of that as well. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you think that
Who
people
would leave their nation right in the middle of, such a, tumultuous time?
Right. You think that some of the people here are expatriates for any number of reasons, but nobody in here strikes you immediately as like cutthroat. Like there may be criminals, there may be opportunists, but it seems like the vast majority of people are making the best of this situation here.
So you're clearly not looking at Italian.
I'll flag down a Waitron and see, can I get a table for the three of us?
Yeah, a beautiful half-elven server wearing the colors of House Fjarlin immediately like sachets and directs you towards an open table. She just quickly snaps her fingers and prestidigitates away a spill and the remnants of food, and she kind of quickly gathers up the abandoned cups and such, even with like a mage hand cantrip, and clears the table for you all. The server, what's that?
I tell her that's a nice trick.
The faster I work, the more I get paid. But she takes some orders from you all. Food can be arranged. She also inquires if you're looking to arrange accommodations for the night. Impressing that they have some suites available, and she kind of explains the rates of those. But you all have food and drink beyond just kind of the rations and simple meals of being on the road for several days. And you again just kind of soak in this place. The musicians continue to play masterfully, and eventually like a juggler comes out as well and begins juggling knives and things of that nature.
How good is this juggler?
He seems very focused. He's juggling like 4 daggers. I think maybe even during the Festival of Brightblade, you might have seen a juggler juggling like 6 daggers, so you probably considered that, more impressive.
Okay. I'm just wondering, like, if I throw like a dagger to, like, just try to throw it into it, like, would they be able to incorporate that, or would I cause it the whole thing to fall crashing down?
So this guy is House Fjarlin trained, you would imagine, as most of the entertainers are here, but it's also like, it's like the Tuesday night performer, you know what I mean? Like, he's not... You can certainly try.
Okay. And like, I'm not trying to mess
Headliner.
them up. I'm just like excited. I was like, hey, when I see them like they added an extra dagger, I'll be like, cool, and I'll throw in another one. So I'm sort of
If he
tossing it.
goes to pull a dagger, I'm gonna be like, no.
And I'm actually going to join. I'm going to join him and try and stop him. Instead of saying, I'll be like, listen. If you want to see more daggers, I'll show you more in the room. I can do more.
You can juggle.
All three of you, just go ahead and make grapple checks with either strength or dexterity. So roll and add your strength or your dexterity bonus.
7.
Out of 23. That's my dexterity.
16. So yeah, I imagine it's more like I go to throw a dagger in and then it just disappears. I'm like,
Yeah.
I get another dagger and it disappears.
Yeah.
and meanwhile, I'm handing them slyly back.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going around the table and back into my belt. Italian, I think someone is stealing my daggers and they're replacing them. Watch out. This place is wild.
I also just thought of Kung Fu Hustle. You guys big fans of Kung Fu Hustle? Who is throwing handles? Perfect. Well, you all managed to stop him from doing that. I mean, this performer seems perfectly capable, as I said, but it's a weekday night, so he may not be the best of the best that they have. Also, he's a juggler. Like, juggling is not the highest art form. Sorry, jugglers.
Mm-hmm.
By the
Comes all
time...
the hate mail.
Yeah.
Our one fan is a mind juggler.
Yeah.
I taught myself to juggle while working at an amusement park.
Oh, that's awesome. I
can
can't
sort of do the 3 items, but I'll drop it after like 4 revolutions. But yeah.
A table typically has... it doesn't... there's more than 3 chairs here. There's, let's say, 4 at the table. The 4 top.
Well, we have an Azure with us, right? She's...
there's 5. So as you all, as I said, interfere with the ghost plans, a hobgoblin woman strides up to you. Gideon, you take note of her first. Actually, let's compare passive perceptions real quick, everyone.
-1.
So 9 passive.
9.
Yeah. Gideon, what's yours? 14. Talion.
13.
Okay. So, Ghost, you are still mystified by the by the crawling daggers that you seem to have picked up at some point, leaving your hands and depositing themselves back in your belt. But the other 2 of you look up. Azure probably looks up as well as this hobgoblin stomps over to your table. You can see that her hands are empty. She has no weapon drawn at the moment, although you can see that she is wearing like a chainmail shirt under like a set of traveling clothes, and she does have a long sword holstered at her belt. Doesn't seem to be they don't seem to be big on peace binding weapons here in this city. So everybody is strapped, but as she strides over to the table, she quickly... actually, she would kick aside this 5th chair to kind of make room for her to stand. And she levels a finger at you, a ghost. And this is maybe the moment you take notice of her. And she speaks tensely. She's not shouting to attract the attention of everybody else. But she says, You reek of the Empire. Have you been plundering the tombs of my ancestors?
Not today.
She glares. And she looks at the rest of you to see your immediate reactions to this. And you just remain standing. But then she takes a moment to size you up. So she sees a gnome, she sees a dragonborn, she sees a particularly constructed warforged, and then a human man, nondescript, but standing out just by contrast. So I believe you are the ones that my sisters whisper of. And she kind of hooks her foot, pulls the chair, and sits down, throws up a hand for the server to bring her a drink. We have much to discuss.
I have two sisters.
Perhaps we start with names.
I have many sisters. I am Durkala Durga of the Kek Valar.
Do I know Kek Valar?
So I'm going to say I'm going to roll over your guys' natural 20s earlier on your goblinoid check. In Dargoon, you had heard Durkala, and Durkala isn't her first name, it's a title. And you would know that these are the equivalent of like bards to your understanding. They're the tellers of the histories of Dakan, basically. So in Dargoon, it's a goblinoid nation. A lot of them still kind of venerate the old Dakani Empire. So you take that's what she's all referring to. Kek Volar. Do you know of Kek Volar? You all have heard reference to a couple of the Dakani clans that still exist. So you would know Kek Volar as the word bearers. So they're these...
But not the Fangs that we are... Okay.
No.
All right. I will introduce myself as, Gideon Blacklake, because that's who I am.
Talion Tildavandi at your service.
I'm a ghost.
She nods. I think it's quite fortuitous, or perhaps it's fate, depending on your estimation of things, that our paths have crossed in this way. I am here, and I seek what you seek, but I think perhaps for different reasons. But we can be of use to one another. The server
That's a lot of presumption.
The server delivers her drink. She kind of, cuts herself off and keeps to herself.
I slide the server like a couple extra silver and said, "Give us a few minutes."
Kind of lean forward and I pitch my voice just a little bit, and I'm like, "You're looking for a house of pleasure too?"
She kind of just hooks a thumb. She says, "Vales is that way. They have changelings there, whatever form you like. Perhaps," and she, actually the coins get swept up by the server, but she says, "Perhaps you would like to avail yourself of their services while the rest of us have a civil negotiation here."
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you for directing me in the correct direction. But I'm going to hold on for a second, and I'm going to turn over to the ghost. I'm going to kind of nudge him. I'll be like, "Hey, I've got someplace to go with you shortly after this."
No, you do not.
I've heard
He needs an education. He wants an education.
I am
He
a
has
freshman in
nothing
college.
to be
If I'm going to
educated
experiment, now's the time to do it.
We are not getting the Warforged laid.
She presses on, ignoring the lot of you. I've heard some of what has set you on this path, and I know a side of the tale you have yet to hear. I will share much of what I know freely, but for the rest, I require payment in blood, sweat, and spent magic.
Vales is that direction.
You can see that in spite of herself, like a small smile kind of crooks up the corner of her otherwise like stern expression. She hides it by quickly taking a deep drink of her mug, and she says, "I don't think a lot of you understand at all what's transpiring here.
I don't understand a lot. That's absolutely.
And by all means, please enlighten. I kind of tip the wine glass, take a sip myself.
I am a dirge singer, Dirkala, dirge singer in your common tongue, of the Kek Valar, the word bearers. We trade in the histories of the Dakani Empire. We preserve the word. We seek to better all of the heirs of Dakan that still exist to this day.
It's our understanding that the word may be in danger of being devoured, shall we say.
She is kind of quizzical at that. So, what do you mean?
There are many fangs about, many greedy maws.
She leans back and kind of like glares at you a little bit. She says, "Oh, we don't have an association with them, but it is them that perhaps I have come seeking as well. As I said, I know much of this tale that I don't believe you all know, and perhaps you know things of which I know not. So I'll begin with this exchange of information. When the Brellish man, this Verdon, dreamt of a treasure in Pollard Draw, it set a series of curious events in motion. And after he stole the warrior's heart from its lost and honored place, another dreamed of his theft. The Lesh of Kek Aram. And you would all know that, like, a Lesh is, like, the chieftain of a hobgoblin clan. And you've never heard of Kek Aram, but she actually goes on to explain. You must know of my kin, Kek Valar, the word bearers, the singers of the old song and keepers of the old histories. Perhaps you know of Kek Sharat as well, the blade bearers. Kek Aram is far more militant than even them, and far less interested in civility with non-goblinoids. So when the Lesh dreamt of this Brellish rat sneaking into Dargoon and departing with the treasure of the old empire, he set his warriors and spies out, and they trailed it to Zalargo. And that is where you come into the story, I believe. She, like, looks at Talion at this. I guess sensing that you're the Zill in the party since you're the gnome.
Can't hear you.
I can hear you, but barely. Your mic is doing that thing where it's pitching you down a little bit. Yeah.
The warrior's heart was set to be displayed in a museum. We were set to guard that.
Indeed. And when the agents of the Kek Aram came for it and you interfered, kept it from returning to his hands, it only served to stoke his ire. But that is why you have this stench of the Empire upon you. I can smell the remnants of an artifact. Strongest on you. And she points at a ghost.
I just had some meat earlier, not smelling that.
Well, he may have eaten it too at some point in time, so
exactly.
He likes to eat things.
You had it in your mouth. You were.
Which is why he needs to go with me after this to Vales.
I hear if you keep going, there's a place called Lines, even wilder.
Maybe we should have established some Vales and Lines at the start of this. Because you're pushing it. She takes a swig and then she slams her mug down, kind of coming to a sudden realization. You were all aboard the lightning rail when it was attacked by that Margul tribe.
Yes.
It was westbound, and here you are. This all makes sense. One of my sisters spoke with the Margul chief to ask why he would attempt something so foolish. Care to venture a guess?
He wanted the warrior's heart.
Yes, but how did he know it was aboard the train?
He dreamt of it.
Precisely. A dream, as well. He called it a vision of the albino bugbear they venerate as champion of the dark deity that they idolize, falsely promising his tribe of a great gem upon the train. Kekaram seeks still to take back this relic, to raise an army of honored dead to bolster their ranks and continue their glorious purpose. I've heard of skirmishes still on the border of Dargoon with Brelish and Zil forces, and I'd be certain that slower and more subtle strikes are in motion. Honor bearers, as if these mad folks know the meaning of honor. And you take from the context, those of you with natural 20s, that Kek Volar, word bearers, Kek Sharat, blade bearers, Kek Aram, they must have taken that moniker and called themselves the honor bearers. Someone put dreams into the thick skulls of these agitators, the thief, the chief, and the lesh alike. And my order has been looking for the cowardly one who is pulling the strings. I came here to learn more of hags, not the 3 that rule this country, but the many that live freely within it. And if not to find the culprit, at least to better know their methods. So, what whispers or tales have you heard of this? It seems you've been led here as well.
Oh,
Wasn't there some guy that had dreams that... Oh, man.
Yeah.
it was the dwarf you ripped off 5 times.
I kind of feel bad about that.
No. Yes and no. Yes and no. A ghost, you're a reader of mysteries.
Damn.
Go ahead and make an investigation check for me.
I will do so. And that is a total of 19.
That's very good. So yes, a couple of things occurred to you. Verdon Top, the man who discovered what he called the heart of the seawall and what she's calling the warrior's heart, had a dream that led him to the ruins where he found it. Now she's saying that the lesh of this very militant Kek had a dream that it was stolen and was led to where to find it. The bugbears chieftain had a dream that it was upon the train and that he should steal it back. When Verdon was petrified, you were also told by Detlev, the agent aboard the train when you all were heading into Sharn, that a clerk at the library had a dream where he was visited by like a stern grandmother and told to put this booby-trapped book into the library, basically putting that landmine in Verdon's path. All of that kind of jives. It seems like all of these things were pertaining to Verdon getting the gem, Verdon losing the gem, these other forces pursuing the gem. With a 19, a ghost, the one thing that doesn't make sense to you, and it hasn't made sense to you since the night that it happened, you had a dream as well.
Correct.
And it may be related to your divinatory studies. It may have just been a vision masquerading as a dream. But all of that being said, yours is leading you here. With a 19, I think it occurs to you at this moment what maybe should have occurred to you before you set out on this multi-day long pilgrimage across the international borders. It wouldn't make sense for the same entity or whoever has the ability to implant these dreams in others' minds and cause this discord. It doesn't make sense to you that they would have given you a dream that leads you here. So what you feel like you're encountering now as like somebody who reads a lot of mysteries is like that odd detail in the second act that only really makes sense in the third act. I'd say a 19 is just low enough that you don't puzzle it out entirely. But it just seems odd to you that a dream led you here when all of these other dreams seemed aimed at more ruinous outcomes.
It's almost if there are multiple entities that are maybe at odds and are using us as their dream warriors and sending people on various missions.
And that slowly kind of begins to occur to you. At least whoever sent you that dream was perhaps at odds with the rest of this.
I'm not sure a ghost would put that together, though. But I would also say all of this out loud. Like this would be a dialogue, monologue, and everyone would be hearing my innermost thoughts as I experience them firsthand.
You start narrating, like, out of all the taverns and all of Greywall, she had to walk into ours.
Walk in on this.
She's, like, glaring at you the whole time as you're like, the dame had tusks that went on until next week. She's just angrily hobgoblin glaring at you. So are you had that information. Are you starting to share that a bit? Are you going to tell her about the dreamers?
I've never had a filter. I would not have one now. So I would just be blurting out things excitedly as they came to my mind. That it also is weird that I would be the one chosen to have a dream because I don't dream. So I don't know if that was intentional by someone or if it was just happenstance. But it just seemed like an odd touch that I would be the one that gets the dream, but that seems like there are possibly multiple entities working at odds and that we are somehow caught up in the middle of it. But I'm also fine with that because I wanted to figure out what him means. And now we're closer to that.
She kind of takes all this in. She finishes her drink. You can see the server kind of like at a distance, kind of just eyeballing you all, waiting to be beckoned back over as she kind of goes about serving other tables. But she thinks about all this for a moment and she nods. And she says, you mentioned the Fangs. You have reason to believe that they are behind all of this, it seems. My order has... What's that?
Interested parties have reason to want stability in Drome. The Fangs are a threat to that. Or at least it's believed they are.
My order has kept an eye on these terrorists, and they believe their empire is failing them. They seek to drive a further wedge into the relations of Drome and the Five Kingdoms, as you've alluded to. Perhaps they do have their claws in this business. I can confer with my sisters for more on these, but as I said, perhaps we should solidify this association with a bit of a side trek, if we might.
What do you propose?
This city is, as many of your great cities are, built upon the stones and bones of Dakan, Korash Kar. Beneath our feet are sprawling tunnels, some picked clean of their treasure and honor, and serving as warrens for the... What do you call them in your tongue? The small, red, scaly dogs? And she kind of like points to a table over to the side.
Kobolds?
Kobolds, yes, this is the word. The lower ones, the lower tunnels though, they still hold things of interest to the Empire. The Zoriat scum that rules this town arranges for excursions into the depths they call Kiras in the Goblin tongue, the deep doors. And I have a lead on the location of a small tomb that I would desire to lay eyes on, but by reputation there are Delkir in this part of the depths, and I would not face them alone. Come with me to the tomb of Jord. If the tomb has been sacked, you're welcome to squabble over what remains of coin and gems, but the artifacts of my people are my own. There is a bounty as well on Delkir. If we encounter some, you're welcome to claim their teeth and that coin for yourself. And when we return, I will commune with my sisters, and we will aid you in your hunt for these fangs.
So, quick question, because Michael is somewhat confused, and I'm not sure if a ghost would be as what. So the Dalkir, aren't those like the dream, like multi-dimensional beings from millennia ago?
So maybe it's my pronunciation that's messing you up. The plane of dreams is called Dalquor, I think.
Okay.
This is the Daelkyr, the Dalkir, the
like
demon
the
things.
Cthulhu.
Like the with the tentacles and the grafting and whatnot. I've always read it as Dalkir, Daelkyr.
Okay, yeah.
So
So I was thinking this was like the Dalquar or whatever
Yeah, so
multi-dimensional dream warrior people.
Yeah, the Dalquar is the name of the plane of dreams. The Kiori are the name of the creatures that inhabit it. But yes, maybe it's just a pronunciation thing.
All right. I just make sure because I knew just enough to be confused by that because I was like, well, so yeah, it makes
King
sense.
Keith Baker for a pronunciation guide or something.
Yeah. I'm sure he's done podcasts. I've listened to some of them.
There's enough DAL anything in Eberron that it's like enough.
Yeah. A ghost, go ahead and make a history check for me too. You're hearing these.
All right, I'll just use my 18 for that. Seems like a good time to get a good roll, which makes that a 23 for me.
Cool. So she said the Zoriat scum that rules this town. Zoriat is the name of the plane of madness. And thinking back to what you've read about Droam and realizing like, oh yeah, this is Greywall. You know that Greywall has like a mayor appointed by the rulers of the hags, the rulers of the country. And that mayor himself is a mind flayer. And like Zoriat is also where the Dale Kier are from. And like as Gideon, as Andy just said, really, those are like the weird tentacle monsters, like your Dolgons and your Dolgrums, and basically like your four-armed goblins and your weird tentacle Hellraiser guys and stuff. And you would know that the Dakani Empire, the goblins, like back in the day, before humans were like a big deal on the continents, basically fought the Dale Kier and worked with orcs to bind them, basically to like the Eberron equivalent of hell or whatever, Kyber, the dragon below. All of that is to say, you don't need to know all that cosmology, but you would know. Yes, what she's saying here doesn't have anything to do with the Kiori or any of that Kalashtar stuff.
Gotcha.
It sounds as if we may have an accord then.
She nods.
When?
The day grows late. You seem weary from the road, and she points to Talion and says, "This one has plans for the evening, it seems, so perhaps it's best to embark in the morning."
Fair enough. Meet here mid-morning?
Yes, I'm staying here as well. And
To success, then.
yeah, she calls for the server, who sees that it's a safe time to kind of revisit and comes with a fresh round for your table. Arms filled in like a mage hand carrying another mug as well. She splays them out on the table, and Durga picks up her cup and cheers you back. For the glory of the Empire. And then she just kind of this is the first time you see her break out into a full smile, because she knows that you all won't really echo that sentiment, but she smiles and just chugs down her drink.
To the stench of tomb raiders.
She slams the mug down and glares at you. and
Right,
maybe
to be respectful of other cultures' artifacts in this adventuring party.
yeah.
I thought we were going to go steal them.
No.
I totally misunderstood what was being said then.
She wishes to recover the artifacts of her people. We are welcome to the coin and any other items that might not be of cultural value.
But that sounds like what Italian says, that we're going to be like nice to people and then we taking all their stuff when they're not looking.
She leaves the table.
Hey, just stop listening to
She gets up and leaves.
Just trying to educate you.
It was nice meeting you.
All right, perfect. Well, it is getting close to the 10th hour, so I think it's about time to start wrapping it up here. So that means next session we will dig into a little bit of a dungeon crawl, perhaps. It's always good to get
in a game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, it's always nice to have a little side quest, get in the middle of your main quest,
I always laugh about any game that I run. Like there are neither dungeons nor dragons in my games of Dungeons nor
Yeah.
Dragons.
Well, you guys spent several sessions, gallivanting around the city, and now you're in another city. It's time for, I don't know, I could have done some wilderness adventures while you guys were traveling, but I just wanted to get you guys into Drome. But all that being said, anybody have any questions specifically about the plot? I think I need to write up a recap and just kind of set things straight since we go so long between games. But, Andy and Michael, you guys were pretty much spot on with what you pieced back together. The manipulation of dreams is obviously key to this whole conspiracy, and it seems like there may be two parties at odds in that effort nonetheless. But any other questions, comments, or concerns about the game?
So the only thing that had me was I had, I'm not going to say I'm ahead of you by any stretch, but I thought I kind of knew what we were going like. But I was totally thinking we were dealing with the Dal Quar this whole time. So I was like, oh, okay, we're dealing with like the Dream Warrior people. So I was half right, but yet still wrong somehow about that. So that was so I'm kind of, now that that's straightened out, I think I'm a lot better to be able to keep up with what's happening.
Perfect. Yeah. And Durga implied heavily that she thinks hags are to blame, which is why she came to Droam, because that's where hags are for the most part. But yeah, I mean, hags and Kiori both can do dream stuff, so I mean, maybe don't rule it out. You don't know who the other party is in this whole...
That's true.
Perfect. Well, good sesh. It's been fun DMing for you all. Again, I'm Ralph at Cthulhu on Twitter, CRITTHULHU. I run these games somewhat infrequently. I blog even less frequently, and I tweet occasionally. Now that I'm finishing my move into my new home, I hope to get back to all of these things with more frequency going forward. But pleasure gaming with you all this evening. Al, do you want to sign off to the folks?
Sure. This is Big Al. I'm on Twitter at Big Al the Lawyer. I'm a lawyer in Texas, so I enjoy playing Talion Till Devandi. It's nice. The more we can do,
would you represent yourself, or would you prosecute yourself?
I would like to think that Talion is just smooth enough to avoid prosecution for the most part. So I'd definitely be representing myself.
Italian would cop a plea deal faster than,
Talion would be like, yes, that's good. I'm going to testify against that guy. I don't know who it is, but I'll testify against him anyway. Yes. Andy.
At Blackfall Press, playing Gideon, the oft exasperated straight man warrior.
I am Michael. You can find everything I do at the RPG Academy. In this game, I'm playing a ghost who's a warforged, dwarven-sized warforged that, again, was basically created the day of the morning and doesn't really know much about the world. But these people take care of me, and I get them into further adventures.
And Michael, when is the Kickstarter launching for the next Catacon? I think I saw something
Catacon
about
Kickstarter, we just announced August 16th will be the day that it goes live. Our actual event is in November again, 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Dayton Convention Center.
Perfect.
My God, is there a chance that perhaps there may be an in-person session of this game?
Ooh.
Al is the X factor in that equation. I think more so than the rest of us. But
Oh no, I'm going this year.
Oh, perfect.
I'll be there.
Yeah. I haven't told my wife yet, but I'm going this year.
I likely will be. Depends whether we can get kid-free or not. But the two of us may be available.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Hopefully we play again before then. Maybe Al will have grown his beard back by the next time we gather. But damn it, we'll do it. All right. Well, have a good night, guys. Have a good one.
F it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live.
See ya. Happy adventures.
Cheers.
See ya.